Hi and welcome back. So you'll remember we're looking at the performance of a Windows 2003 file server by studying the SMB1 traffic that's hitting that server. We've exported the data from Wireshark. We've filled in some gaps in the data. So we got to the point where we had the data like this. Now, the way that we're going to look at this response time is we're simply going to look at the difference in timestamps between a request that's going to the file server and a response that's coming back from it. So you can see here that we have a request going to the file server and a response coming back. The trouble is that we also have some that overlap. So for example, there's one request there, a second request there, and then the responses come back. That makes it difficult for us to do a straightforward calculation in Excel in that situation. So we're going to look at how we overcome that. One thing you will notice, and this gives us a clue to how we're going to do this, is that this request has a different process ID to this request. So in fact, if we sorted by process ID, then we would sort these into order. Now I said, when I originally exported the data from Wireshark, I said that I didn't think I'd need the multiplex ID. Well, I've learned something in this presentation, in that if we look further down the sheet, what we have is this situation just here, where I have two requests followed by two responses, and they both have the same process ID. Now the reason for this is because for a single process we often have multiple threads that represent the execution within that process. So what we have here is multiple threads that are issuing commands in parallel to each other. So if we look here in process monitor, we can see that we have the SVC host process with a PID of 1044, but if you look in the TID column, you can clearly see that we have multiple threads associated with that process. So I'm going to have to use the multiplex ID to overcome that particular issue. So let me start by sorting the data. So what we do is we sort the data, and we're going to sort it into multiple levels. So we start off, I'm fairly confident everything is for tree ID 34818, but because you might be doing this with a situation where you've got multiple trees, multiple processes, multiple users, I'm going to just run through this as though that were the same situation for me. So we do tree followed by process followed by user followed by multiplex ID, and we sort that lot. Now we'll see that if we check the sheet, we'll see that we have request response pairs in the right sort of order. Everything looks good. And because we sorted out this business with the missing values for the bulk reads, if we go down and find, I know why this is, because it's towards the end, we can see that we have these all sorted into the right order, and everything looks good there as well. So now we've got the data sorted into an order that we can use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an additional column just here, and I'm going to call that column server time in milliseconds. Now actually, when you insert a column into Excel, it assumes the format of the column to its left. So this column at the moment will actually be in this time format, this custom time format. I don't like working with it like that, and I'm going to show you later how to overcome that, but let's just stick with that for the moment. So now what I do is I need to stick a formula into here. And because I'm going to check for three conditions, I need an AND statement. And the conditions I'm going to check for are that I want to be sure that the previous packet was going towards the file server, which is listening on 445, port 445. I need to be certain that my current packet is coming back from port 445. So it's got a source port of port 445. And then I'm going to do this belt and braces approach where I'm going to also check the multiplex ID. So I need to make sure that my current multiplex ID is equal to the one on the previous line. And if all of that is true, then I'm interested in the difference between these two timestamps, because that gives me the turn time in the server. And if it's not true, then I'm just going to put a blank because I don't care. So we have a 2 millisecond response time there, expressed in this way. I said I don't like that type of expression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oh, by the way, if I double click on this just in this corner, copies it down the sheet, and if you're happy to work with this format, that works fine. But I'm going to cheat, and actually I've just noticed that I've already set this up, so I'm going to delete that just to make sure that I show you how we do this. So what I do is I click on one of these time cells, I right click and I choose the format painter, and I click on that, and then I paint the format into a spare cell. So this is because I want to convert my server time into a numeric value. There is a formula to do it, but I can never remember the formula, so this is the way I do it. So I put a 1 millisecond value in there. And now I come back here and I divide my timestamp difference by this value here. But because I'm going to copy this cell down the sheet, I need to anchor to that particular time format cell. Now that doesn't look right, but that's because we're still in the time format, so we're going to reformat these cells into a number format. So that gives me my 2 milliseconds back there, and then I copy that down the sheet, and that gives me values all the way to the bottom of this sheet. So that's good, but if I sort this now back into the frame number order, these values will get messed up because the formulas won't work. So the way I overcome that is I insert a column in there, and I select all of my cells from the previous column. I then move to this column here. Sorry, let's do that again. I select all of them and I press Ctrl+C to copy them. Then I move to this column here, and don't hit Enter and don't hit Ctrl+V at this point, because you don't want to paste the formulas into this cell. What you want to do is paste the values into the cell, and the way you do that is to use the Paste Special feature, and I access Paste Special using Alt-E-S. I think there's a way of doing it via the ribbon, but I don't know it, so you can look it up in the help text, but it's Alt-E-S is the key sequence. Choose values, click. Now what you see is that if I take this value here, you can see I have a value and I don't have the formula that I had before, even though I've got the value derived from that formula. So now I'm free to delete this, the formula column, and now I have values, and now it's safe for me to resort the data back into the order I want it. So let's just get rid of those. Whoops, add a level. Back into frame number, smallest to largest, and we're back to where we were. So that's how we get the server time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom of this here, and when I double clicked on the PDF, it took more than a minute for the PDF to load. So the first thing I'm going to do is check how long it actually took on the wire. So the way I do that is quite simple. I take the last timestamp and subtract the first timestamp, the one right up at the top of this column, and that gives me a value of 1 minute 16 seconds, 16.4 seconds, or 76 seconds if you prefer. Now what I'm interested in is what's the contribution from the file server. So let's just sum this column here. And what that tells us is that we have an apparent contribution from the file server of 2331 milliseconds. Now that is quite likely to be overstating the value, because we already discussed the fact that we have overlapping requests and responses, so we have things happening in parallel. So just taking that number and definitively saying the file server took 2.3 seconds is perhaps not quite true. But what we can do is we can obviously look at these two values in comparison and see that if we're going to investigate the problem here, it quite obviously is not to the right of my trace point, because we only have 2.3 seconds worst case here. But the problem is somewhere to the left of that trace point in the network or in the PC. So let's go a bit further with our trace here. So bear in mind that this is probably overstating the fact because of this parallel processing, and we're assuming everything's being done in a serial manner, which it possibly isn't. But I'll show you how we can spot that in a second. The only other thing is that to offset the overstatement, there's possibly an understatement as well, because we are not accounting for any time it takes to send repeated segments. But in my experience, that's not usually where the problem is with a file server. Once the file server's read the data off the disk or from the SAN and has it all ready to send, the actual time it takes to deliver that data is usually not a factor. The only thing that might be a factor is TCP windowing as it goes out towards the PC, but that's something you can deal with later on. Right now, we're just going to concern ourselves with the server turn time. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to do a bit more analysis of this particular situation of the 2,331 millisecond responses. So I'll see you soon.